Welcome to Get Your House in Order, where the Medici brothers, investors and entrepreneurs, Cris Auditore and Dr. Philip Zimmermann, discuss timeless principles of success, significance and legacy. A podcast for business owners who want to design a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Sponsored by the one and only exclusive Medici community.
Welcome back to Get Your House in Order, where it's all about designing a beautiful life for business owners. Today I'm excited to talk about a subject that literally could change your life if this is the first time you really would take action about this, because it's about stop neglecting yourself. One aspect that business owners that we meet over and over again struggle with. We maybe build a successful business, but then all of a sudden we don't take care of ourselves. So stop neglecting yourself. Cultivate the life you deserve. Cris, why do you think this is such an important topic, especially for business owners?
Well, for me, this topic comes out of pain. I remember when I was in my early 20s setting up my first ventures. I was running a catering business. I opened up some shops at Frankfurt Airport, and I think I had like 40 people, 50 people employed. I was juggling a whole lot of things. I was working 7 days a week, and I just from one day to the next, I just hit a wall. And you know, looking back at it, you know, no time at all to take care of myself. And I hit such a wall back then. You know, you can call it a burnout. You know, for me, it was a burnout. I remember our parents stepped in and literally said, "Cris, you need to get out of your business." And, you know, since we're talking to business owners here, you know, who wants to hear the message, you need to get out of your business? And our parents bought me a one-way ticket to the United States of America. We were living in Germany. I was running the operations in Frankfurt. And basically, they took away my phone and my computer, my emails, and they grounded me. And this is like the most terrible thing that can happen to you. You've turned 18. You think you're a free man. You want to set up your own business. I was employing people, and all of a sudden, your parents need to step in and save you. So this was terrible for me. Yeah. And I went on this trip over to the US, and basically, went from one Barnes and Noble to the next, reading contemplative books and trying to piece myself back together. I had a few addresses of some friends that we had over there, and this was at the beginning of my 20s. Now, looking back at it, I'm very glad that this happened at the beginning of my career. I meet some people in their 30s or in their 40s that, you know, all of a sudden they've, you know, so much neglected themselves that they you know, run in a burnout, or, you know, there can be a million different factors in business that can kind of lead to that point. But anyhow, I've taken a whole bunch of lessons out of my early 20s when it comes to that. There are really some things I need to do in order for this not to happen again. So we can talk about that.
Yeah, so I think especially in this hustle culture that we find ourselves in, where we all, even on social media, see how people are going all of the time, all the time. The big shift that happened in my mind was when I realized that when I take a step back and take care of myself, I can actually give more. So I'm one of my values is, you know, I want to produce, I want to build, I want to get something done. And so when people told me about, hey, you need to take care of yourself because you want to enjoy life, that really does not resonate. For me, it resonated, 20 years ago when I realized and I studied that if you actually recharge, you have more to give. It's like sleep. You know, we can't beat it. We can't just go all the time. When we really take the time to rest, we actually can produce more. So sometimes we all know that when we have worked a long day and we still try to get something done and it takes forever. Now, if we would have just done that when we rested and out of a restful state, all of a sudden we also get a lot more done. So the motivation behind rest and renewal and recharging is actually something where I feel like everybody has a different angle, and that's totally okay. What is your motivation for rest?
Well, I never needed a motivation to work. So, I'm a hustler myself. No one ever needed to tell me that I need to, get up and build a business or go to work. For me, this is so ingrained in my personality. I want to move things forward. I want to hit the ball out of the park, and I want to build great things. So I've never needed motivation in order to, to get going. But what I need motivation to is to keep going. And that I only find if I have enough time that really to kind of, as you say, recharge your batteries. So for me, it's like a lot of people need discipline to work. I need discipline to rest. Yeah. And I even have a whole a talk that I've developed years ago where I talk with business leaders about the discipline of rest, because that does, for most of us who are entrepreneurs, that does not come natural. By nature we're driven. By nature we're task oriented. I often kind of give the comparison between people oriented and task oriented. Somewhere on the spectrum, if it's a spectrum, on the one side there's people oriented, on the other side is task oriented. I can, very honestly say the way I started off was, if this is task-oriented, this is people-oriented, I started off over here. I'm 100% task-oriented, and I needed to kind of learn that, it helps if you kind of also like people and, can.
I remember in high school, you did a test, or the whole high school did a test, and you scored on that task-oriented, like.
Well, crazy, yes. Well, it was this personality test on, whether you're choleric, a sanguine, a melancholic, or a phlegmatic. And out of, I think, 600 students, I had the highest mark on choleric. Which kind of was fun. It was actually an American high school. and they thought it was a resurrection of Hitler when they looked at my score. Because I was, you would have said I'm a very bad person if you just looked at my personality. Well, anyhow, coming back to saying, no one ever needed to tell me that I need to work and that I need discipline in that. I know, I've kicked a lot of people, a lot of employees to kind of do more work and get going. I need to kick myself in order to take rest, and so this is kind of one of my lessons. And I find there are a lot of entrepreneurs who have exactly that problem, because they have a goal that they want to achieve something great, which I think when made like that, and we don't need to excuse ourselves that we're driven, that we're hustlers, that we want to produce. But in order to do that really for the long run, you need to learn how and discipline yourself how to rest.
Yeah, in that whole conversation, what I find very intriguing, you have these two sides. You have the hustle culture, I hustle, or it's all about really enjoying yourself. You do less. You try to optimize it so that you can enjoy life. And what I sometimes feel like it's missing in that whole thing is that if we work because we have an impact, we have a purpose behind. It's not about just working 2 hours a day and then taking the rest of the day off. It's really we really want to work and produce because there's an impact and there is a purpose behind. And still, the danger, especially for people who have a higher purpose and an impact in a business where they feel like I'm making a difference. So it's not just about being burned out on things you don't like to do. We had the privilege for years now to do a lot of things that we like to do. We enjoy doing it, and we always tell business owners you need to hire out the things you don't like to do and that don't give you energy. But even then, it's so important to rest. And that's where the big shift, and at least in my mind, happened, that I was like so excited about work. I'm so excited about doing things, building things, that like you said, it had to become a discipline to actually rest. And that's a certain person that needs that. And if that's not taken care of, your impact, your purpose, your business, and that's what I try to explain to business owners, will vanish. Because it's not about, you don't cheer somebody and celebrate, when it's halftime. You celebrate at the end. And our end is not like, how much do we produce this year? We are thinking in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And when we talk about also a lot when we talk about the Medici legacy, what does our legacy look like in 200 years? And having that discussion. And that's where rest and renewal is so critical.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to talk about this topic of pain and burnout for a moment, because I can't even count on two hands how often I've met very successful entrepreneurs who've just hit a wall. And actually, I remember at the last Management conference, we actually had a session where we just asked people to share some of the stories where they've just, from one day to the next, basically hit a wall. And there was one a business guy who basically said that he was running, I think, 4 different companies on full speed, and from one, and then all of a sudden it was too much for him. And he literally could not get out of bed anymore. And when he was sharing the story, I was like, "What? You can't get out of bed? Let me bring you some coffee, or you need a good kick." Well, the way he was telling us that story, he didn't need a kick, he didn't need coffee. He was just so depleted. He was just so exhausted that literally, and that's why it was so shocking to us. It was months that he would not come out of his room. And if you meet him now, he's the most cheerful person. He's got a whole bunch of things running, and is a great successful businessman. But there was a point where he's hit a wall. I remember another story of someone that I met on the island here of Mallorca, where they've had an exit. They built a company. They scaled it. I think it had like 400 people. It was a technology company, and then he sold it. And then all of a sudden he had this, kind of reached the pinnacle, sold the business, had lots of money. And then he kind of tripped into a loss of purpose. And actually hit a burnout and needed to go to therapy. He ended up, spending a lot of his money on therapy because, all of a sudden he had lost this purpose. So we can, there are probably a million different things why we can hit this point where we just, we don't feel like we can function anymore. We've overstretched it. It's also different personality types. We can get tripped up in our mind depending on our different personality types. So, it's really also an analysis of yourself. If we talk about cultivating, yourself, and you also need to analyze and become a student of what do you need. And I know, Philip, you need different things. With your personality trait than I need, and that's where I encourage business guys all the time. You need to not just be a study of leadership or business development and all this external stuff, or take care of your employees. You need to also be a student of what do you need, because at the end of the day, we are the most important asset to our business. Yeah. I mean, if we drop, in many cases the business drops. If we flunk, then things can go down in our work life, in our business. So it's a study of ourselves that also is really important here.
Well, when an employee comes to us who produces a lot of value to our company, and they are struggling, I mean, the first thing we tell them is to get healthy, get well, because there is no way in just going through that pain if it lasts too long. You can. So I always tell people life is like sprints. You give it all, but then you need rest. You need a renewal, and then you can do another sprint. That's a metaphor that I prefer than the metaphor of a marathon, where it's all just run at the same pace. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, life is not like that. Life comes in little seasons, basically, and the key to a sprint is that you give it all you have, but then you don't jump into the next sprint. So if somebody comes as an employee who is struggling, they need to get well first, because otherwise we know in the long run that it will cost us more than getting that person well right now. But with ourselves, we sometimes forget that and neglect that, because we the advice we give to somebody else, we don't take to ourselves. So when you come to struggle and you struggle, and I give you an advice and say, Chris, okay, I'll take care of whatever you needs to get done. But I don't give that generosity often to myself when I'm struggling. So that's a big problem, where we really have to realize, that we are, that we are $1 million racehorse. That's how I heard it from somebody explain that if you have a $1 million racehorse, you don't take that racehorse to McDonald's and and let him drink, the supersized meals, supersized Cokes, and eat a Big Mac. You don't make sure you don't let that horse sleep only 2 hours a night. No, you do everything you can when it comes to making sure that horse is treated well, so that it can perform when the race is gonna take place. And being a business owner is an ultra we are athletics. We are in the race. We are really kind of need to perform on such a high level that if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't produce. And so we need to make sure that we take as good care of ourselves as we would do we would do if we would have a racehorse.
Well, and I remember the principle that I often talk about, and I actually put it in the book as well, as the principle of the Sabbath that I learned here early in my 20s. So let me just share about that. So when I was hit my burnout and I was in the U.S., my parents had given me an address of a pastor in Harrisonburg, Virginia, that I went to visit. And so, I rented a car and drove out there and visited this pastor. He had a very big congregation, big church, like they do have that in the U.S. And I remember sitting on his couch, and he really took out of his busy week, he took out a couple of days to talk to this young 20-year-old kid from Germany who was having a burnout because he was doing too much. And so he talked to me about the principle of the Sabbath. Now, I'd never heard about it. It wasn't part of my culture. And perhaps, most of us don't come out of the Jewish culture, so we're not Jews. But the principle really comes out of this Old Testament principle that, out of the creation story, that God created the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he rested. And he took a day off, as if God needed a day to rest. And then even the story goes that in the 10 Commandments, out of the 10 Commandments, next to not killing people and not stealing, there's the commandment to take a day off. And so I remember this lesson from this pastor. His name's Kerry. He told me, Chris, after 6 days of work, you need 1 day off. You need to take 1 day off. And really, that means you need to drop everything. Drop everything. No emails, no communication, no meetings. Stay put. Stay in your house and just take that day off. Now, I did a lot of reading since then on this whole subject, and actually, but I've adopted it as my philosophy. And I don't care if you're a Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, or whatever. I think it's an incredible principle that actually, and in a sense, it speaks a little bit about against the work-life balance. So I've often said, I this whole concept of work-life balance, for me, it doesn't sound really sexy. I'm not a work-life balance. I like to work. And so when I work, I work. And then when I take off, I take off. And so I've often said that even a weekend is not, it's a little bit too much. So for the first 15 years of my business life, I've worked 6 days a week and took 1 day off, and I was fine with that because that 1 day I went offline, no communication, nothing. And since then I've told this to lots of people, and some of even our business guys here in the community started adopting that. That really there is such great value to have this 1 day a week where you're just outside of all normal communication, no one can reach you, you're basically off the grid, and you reconnect with yourself, with God, with nature, and become a human being again. One of the things that Kerry said back then, Chris, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And that has always been like an interesting, so much of us ourselves is doing as business guys, but there's a day where we actually need to be human beings.
Yeah, I remember actually the place where I was 21 years ago, where I made that decision to, in the midst of the most hectic time, I first thought I'm going to get through this, and then I will include this principle into my life of taking 1 day off. And then I decided, no, if I'm not doing it now, I will never do it. So 21 years ago, I remember where I was sitting, and I made that decision. Now, here's the thing. For 20 years, this worked like magic, because I could go, I could conquer the world in that one week. and then take a day off, no email, no communication, just do whatever you want to do. That's kind of the rule. I do whatever I want to do
on the day of Sabbath.
On the day of Sabbath.
Yeah, that sounds like a bit dangerous if you ask me. But
well, I have some values to back it up. So I didn't say I do everything I feel like I need to do, but then I got kids later in life than you. So I looked at your 3 kids and I was like, that's a lot of work. So I'll just not have any until later in life. And now I have 2 little kids. The first kid was not a problem. I still kind of kept my one day, and it was great. Now, when my second child was born, just a few months ago, I made a decision that because of the family, I'll actually take 2 days off. And then for the first time in 20 years, and now I feel more exhausted after the weekend spending with 2 kids than the one day I had off for myself. And I was talking to somebody the other day who was expecting twins, but already had 2 kids, and this person gave me an interesting insight. He said, Philip, with the first child, for the man, nothing really changes. Because in the beginning phase, the woman spends so much time is taking care of the child. There are all kinds of different philosophies on how to work, but in most situations, it's the woman that is 90% the person who takes care in the beginning months of the baby, takes care of the baby, and the man just is there to support. Now, with the second child, all of a sudden it changes because in my case, my wife now has to take care of our baby, so I have to be much more involved in the life of my children, especially my daughter, than I was before. And I realize now it's even more difficult to actually take some time off because you have 2 kids. So I tell people I don't believe in work-life balance, but I believe in work-family balance. Because if you don't, and we'll talk in another episode about marriage and family, because if you don't take care of that, you will not actually get your house in order in that area. So it is something that we have to balance. But I found out with small kids, it's you can't just take a day off and do whatever you want. You have kids in the mix of it. So you raised 3 boys. They one is now starting university. 2 are still at home, but they don't wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning and say, "Hey, a new day begins. Can we play together?" They wake up at 11 o'clock and are hungry. It's a different kind of a problem. But what would you advise people for, especially in a different season when it comes to small children?
Well, I mean, you're telling your own story about how kids are throwing you off basically next to work. Then yes, I mean, there's other responsibilities we have as parents and as leaders, and so I'm thinking of over the course of my career also of other projects or other businesses that I've created where basically it wasn't the family that kind of threw me off, but if I was working on a project or a new venture, and then I'm so over involved, and then the demands are so great. I've employed so many people, and if you then you have stress at work or with a new, all of a sudden things can change that can basically throw you off, and so this is kind of my short-term analysis on this whole subject. If you think you've kind of managed one area of your life, there comes an issue in another area of your life. I know a good friend of mine at the moment. He's in financial trouble. He's got a financial crisis. Now you can talk to him all day about spending time with his family, taking care of the kids, or setting up your business. Probably he has financial problems, and that just gives him so much unrest in his life that he is really not functioning well. So I think we need to take stock of ourselves on a continual basis. How are we doing? And then, you know, back to this this million horse dollar analysis. You know, we need to look at ourselves. How healthy are we? And if there's an area where we're not healthy, we need to fix that, because we need to develop ourselves in a beautiful way. Another area I think is sports. And you know, food. You know, you were mentioning kind of you don't take $1 million horse race to McDonald's. You know, some business guys are just eating crap. Not to say shit, but they're just putting a lot of, you know, sugar and a lot of carbs into themselves just to, you know, to kind of manage the stress. And you know, this is always we all know this is a short-term solution. You know, you kind of you know, you try to, you know, in the moment you try to take care of the appetite, but it's not healthy for your body. And I think we pay the consequences of that. You know, poor health, you know, at the beginning in our 20s and 30s, you know, we can kind of, you know, we've got enough energy, you know, we can kind of pull through. But then once you hit, you know, your late 40s, 50s, 60s, and you've got a body that is just, you know, not in good health, then you pay a price for that. And then all of a sudden, all kinds of weird sicknesses show up, and health issues. Because you've neglected that. So I'm really for a holistic approach of looking at what do you need, you know, and we all have different, physicalities. We've got different bodies. We've got different things we need in order to be healthy. But we need to take an honest assessment. And then we need to keep monitoring that. Okay, so I don't know whether I answered your question on the kids here. I can talk more about that. But really, you know, it can be different areas that throw us off.
Well, I think to make sure we have these different categories like we have them for business. I mean, we talk to business owners, and in business we know, you know, we regularly look at marketing, we look at sales, we look at operations, we look at administration, we look at fulfillment, you know, we look at product, all these different, and ask the question, how can we do it better? How can we improve? What is frustrating? What is a problem? You know, so we are very strategic when it comes to these areas. And the plea that I normally do is and give to business owners, that same mentality that makes you successful in business, having that mindset to go through these different categories, set them up for your life and for your business, for your personal life and for your family, that you know what categories, so that, because it's not a one-time fix. Get your house in order is not like, oh, and then it's all clean. You know, I mean, our cleaning lady, you know, spent like 10 hours last week, and she's here today again to clean again, because all of a sudden the house got messy again. And the same is true with our own lives, and part of it is just, you know, it's life, but being reflective and looking at these categories and going like, okay, how am I doing here? How do I rate myself in an area from 1 to 10 when it comes to nutrition last week, when it comes to exercise, when it comes to communication with my wife, when it comes to, you know, how much time I spend with my kids, you know, so that we at least know what are the warning signals that we then can improve. So I kind of identified, you know, oh, I'm in a new season. I need a whole new plan. What got me here will not get me there, you know, if because things change. But having that strategic approach to things, so that I can change it and I can communicate with my wife and even with some stakeholders in business, and on how I set up my life. How do I need to take time off, maybe even during the week to kind of relax? That can be the key to really always go back, and the difference is if you only are running and don't have that time to reflect and don't know what categories to reflect on, you will eventually be in the danger of really burning out or messing up your marriage or kids in the meantime.
Well, so the principle that I talk about in the book that I saw in Cosimo de Medici's life was water your garden. He had a physical location, a place that he would go as a business guy on a regular basis in order to reconnect with himself and nature. And even though he employed a lot of people, you helped him, to kind of take care of his fields and the gardens. There was this place at the Villa di Careggi, just outside of Florence, where he went and worked on his garden himself, and got up early in the morning to kind of work on the garden, water the trees, plant some plants. And that was fulfilling for him in order to kind of reconnect with himself and reconnect with nature. And there's something funny enough about nature that most of us, we work in office buildings, or we work in a professional environment, we work in the cities, and there's something beautiful about getting outside into the mountains, or spend some time at the water, and that kind of reconnects us and helps us. So the principle is, we need to, before we conquer the world, our biggest challenge is always to conquer ourselves.
Yeah.
I've often said, as much as I can blame the whole world on things that go wrong, at the end of the day, I need to look into the mirror and say, actually, I'm the one to blame if things are not rightly set up. So get your house in order. Really, the big principle for me is, it starts with yourself and in some self-assessment.
Yes. It's a good way to close today's episode. Get your house in order. You can actually get the book for free if you go to medicibook.com and read the whole chapter on water your garden. But I hope this kind of some of the ideas sparked at least a new desire to say, okay, I really need to treat myself as $1 million racehorse. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can do on all the different platforms. And if you want to find out more about the Medici community that we've created, where we bring together business owners to create a beautiful life and a beautiful business, you can go to medicilegacy.com, and hope to see you in the next episode again.